Right, we're rolling. On this podcast, we'll be talking about different areas of business and all things marketing. My name is Dave Doyle.
And I'm Dave Alton. This is Social Antics, another marketing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Social Antics, another marketing podcast. Just want to kick off by saying thanks to everyone who I suppose listened over the last week, offered us loads of support, kind messages, and it's been great to get the first episode out and hear the feedback, and we're always up for suggestions or ideas on podcasts going forward. So thankfully, I suppose, Dave, the first episode went off without a hitch.
Well, that's not entirely true. Entirely true. There was something cropped up, I suppose, which we should probably address. So during the last podcast, I may have mentioned Hitler.
Oh, right. You did actually.
You did. That's not what I'm actually talking about. The issue is that we have to have a retraction. I may have mentioned that Brewdog had 12 pubs.
You did.
They actually have 78 pubs across the UK and across the world. So yeah, I got that very much wrong. So apologies.
And
to
you're
Brewdog.
meant to be the academic here. You're meant to be the one that's big into research.
To be fair, I mixed up breweries with bars. Now I know it's a big mistake to make.
I
but
haven't
that was
checked the amount of breweries now, so have you got that one right?
I don't know, but sure, look, we'll rumble it anyway. No one else knows.
Okay, please correct us if we're wrong. I suppose, look, just to remind anyone who maybe not listening last week, but the way we plan on running in with the whole podcast is the first part of the episode will be around news or trends or anything that's been popping up in the last week that we've spotted, areas of interest, and and
then for the focus this week, which is a longer discussion that we have in the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about higher education, which is something that obviously myself and Dave are involved in and are very, very passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. So to kick off this week's episode, Dave, has there anything popped up for you this week?
So I think something that was very interesting during the week, it was an article by Matt Barker from Marketing Week, who looked at the analysis report from Cantor Brands, which came out last week as well, where he basically showed that of the top 75 UK brands, they've lost an aggregate of market capitalisation of 13% since the start of the year, and there's a danger that the final 10 top world brands that are UK based are going to fall out of the top 100 before the end of the year.
Okay,
which again is
layman's terms.
So if you take a brand has a certain valuation in terms of what it's worth. It's not about profit or revenue, obviously that filters into it, but it's what a business is worth in terms of their market cap. And if we look at those UK brands, they have decreased by about 13% in the last year. And if we compare that then, because obviously this is all relative during a COVID year, but if we look at the top 100 brands in the world, those are up 5.9% this year in terms of their market cap, and they're now worth about 5 trillion. Now obviously Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook make up a huge chunk of that. But still it shows a trend that British brands are really, really struggling when it comes to their impact on the global stage when it comes to marketing.
And what kind of brands are you looking at there?
So it was surprising to me, because when you think of UK brands, you think of they've done great stuff over the years. So if you think John Lewis, for example, you think Superdry, you look at Jaguar, all of these brands are starting to really, really decline in value to a level which is really, really unhealthy. And I was actually kind of starting to think to myself, what is it about UK brands that means that they're not performing on the global stage? And even some of those brands like Jaguar, for example, they're not even UK owned anymore. Jaguar is owned by Tata in India.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I suppose if we were to look at then some of the fastest growing UK brands, the two that stood out were one, Brewdog, which is wholly UK owned. They're now up to about 1.2 billion in market capitalisation. Oh, massive company, great company. And then the other one was Costa Coffee, but they were acquired by Coca-Cola last year, so that obviously contributed a huge amount to their kind of growth in the market, shall we say.
Question there for you. So is there anything that you feel is restricting British brands, as you're saying there, to actually performing on a global scale? Is there anything that's actually holding them back a little bit?
I think like it's not just British brands. I think that fundamentally we've seen a huge change in the market recently because of COVID, but also because of the way that people actually consume brands. A lot of people are actually saying now that we're experiencing the death of brands, and it's very, very difficult for companies to compete in the same way that they used to. So if you look at the top 50 top ad spenders 50 years ago, it's pretty much the same group of companies, but they're still spending their money on the same thing, but their market share is declining in each of their equivalent industries. So they're still advertising the way that we would have advertised again 20 years ago. It's all television advertising, print advertising, radio, and they're not able to adapt as quickly as some of the more agile up and coming brands to consumer changes in consumer behavior, trends, and so on and so forth. And we've seen that more recently, where you see brands quickly come on the scene and you don't really know where they've come from, and all of a sudden they're really, really a household name. Just Eat being a prime example, Deliveroo being a prime example. I think based on that report, Deliveroo's market capitalization is up 40% this year. They're up to about $1.9 billion. And
obviously due to COVID and the pandemic and stuff like that, and places shutting down, obviously these kind of companies came to the forefront of innovation and service, really.
100%. But I think even if you look at some of the, so if you take if you were to name the top 10 UK brands in terms of their value, would you think that Dove is on that list?
It's a huge brand, but I think one thing that always strikes me with Dove is not that they changed their marketing suited to what's happening, but they're definitely what would the way of saying it? They're definitely in tune with what's happening at the moment. That they're like, they brought out a brilliant campaign there throughout COVID that was basically focused towards the frontline workers and the nurses with the, I think it was scars in their face from wearing the masks, and it was very kind of in tune with the time, but it was also a nice support message for those staff.
Yeah, but they've always had their finger on the pulse. Like, they were the ones who initially brought out the campaign for Real Beauty, which was unheard of at the time. Even around the time of the Dove for Men, a lot of men were starting to gravitate their consumer behaviour away from Lynx, because that was very, very sexist advertising, and it was, again, Dove is more about having pride in kind of different types of masculinity, so being a father or being kind of a good boyfriend, a good husband. So again, they're very, very good at, from a socio-psychological perspective, understanding the changes in how consumers think about brands and how they consume brands, and obviously all the content that they created associated with those campaigns were very consumable and shareable on social media, whereas a lot of other brands haven't done that. But I think, even to go back to your original question, it shows how much a lot of these organisations have declined. So we've just gone through a year whereby for half the year people were sitting in their front room in their underpants on a Zoom call whilst watching television. And even during that type of a year, big brands like BT, they've dropped a huge amount of market capitalisation, 24% this year, whereas you see the likes of Disney Plus, Netflix taking off and really, really capturing that market. So there's a lot of brands out there that aren't really adjusting their strategy to the new behaviours that we see in not even just a COVID world, but in a new era of marketing where traditional media isn't at the forefront.
Do you think that these brands, some of the big brands you're mentioning there, that they do still put too much of a focus on the traditional marketing?
I think there's too much of a focus on traditional marketing, and I think what they spend on digital it's not organic to digital, or it's not they spend a lot of money on Facebook advertising, but they take their television ad and just put that on Facebook and show it to the world. Again, that doesn't work anymore. 20 years ago,
a lot of the TV adverts is very much a rerun as well. It's the same nearly adverts. It might be changed, but it may as well be the same advert.
Oh no, they're always the same adverts. And then when you see brands actually trying to change their messaging, they get it horribly wrong. So if you take Gillette, every Gillette ad has been the same for the last 10 years. There's a bloke in front of a mirror, good looking wife, good looking girlfriend, shaves himself, brushes his face, and Gillette
another blade
is added to our razors. That's essentially what it was. And then they tried it this year, but they changed their campaign to the Best a Man Can Be campaign, which all of our listeners will have heard of, and it completely collapsed. So again, there's some brands out there that get the pulse of the nation right, and others then just completely lose the run of themselves. But I think beyond that, then, in terms of branding and marketing, how people are actually thinking about how they interact with brands in terms of their daily lives is also changing. So one example that Cantor gave, which I thought was fascinating, was Pret a Manger, who'd be a competitor of Costa Coffee. They're after bringing in a new thing now where if you pay a subscription to a coffee shop, which is unheard of £20 a month, you get unlimited coffee. Like, again, a totally different... changing the business model so that you generate more loyalty from your consumers.
And also you're relying on people not to unsubscribe on that as well.
Oh yeah, no, entirely. But I mean, in a world whereby you can turn around to, again, a bank investment, and again, your market cap is based on recurring revenue. In a world whereby consumer behaviour changes and we're very, very unbrand loyal, again going back to the death of brand, if you can have a scenario where you can guarantee a certain amount of revenue from a certain amount of clients, even if you're taking a hit on your margin, that can be hugely, hugely valuable to you.
It's a good idea, I suppose, and that when you just said that, it kind of reminded me, we talked about Gillette there as well, that whole idea of the $1 million shave club crowd.
Oh, the dollar shave club. The dollar shave club, yeah.
They were $1 million shave by the end of it.
When he sold them, it was billions.
No, I think that was a great idea, and I think that kind of subscription model is great, and I think definitely from a business plan, as you said, it is definitely a one to look at to see, can you build it in.
Again, it's just to show that I think the main point of this is that a lot of the traditional brands that are out there, they are suffering and they are starting to die off. And again, these are still massive companies. I'm not saying they're going to get liquidated in the morning, but it just shows the opportunity that exists within the marketplace, within, again, the world that we live in, with changing consumer behaviours, with disruptive technology, with the agility that you have now to change your business model. I think it's very, very interesting to see how those three different factors line up, and they are negatively impacting UK brands at the moment. And let's see if some brands kind of grow up that list over the next couple of years.
Perfect. I think you have a good story coming up about Uber, is it?
Not so much a good story, but I suppose an interesting story. Well, I suppose for the 3 or 4 people still listening, better have a good story. So last year, a lot of people know that Uber was basically banned from London.
Yeah.
And was it yesterday? I believe.
Yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, after a 4-day hearing at the Westminster Magistrates, Judge Tam Ikram, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, basically said that despite Uber's historical failings in terms of driver safety, they now feel that Uber are a fit and proper operator to receive a private hire vehicle license, so they can now operate in London for the next 18 months is what the license has been granted for.
Whatever your thoughts on this, I just think that is madness in the times we're living in terms of trying to stop the spread of COVID.
It's a bit of an ironic one, all right. Like, I mean, I think the main thing that this was about safety. There was a lot of unauthorized drivers able to use drivers, which again now I've tried to find out how they have combated this issue, and I don't really still think it works. Like, I mean, there's no regulatory body. No, like how do you like when you get into an Uber when you're abroad? Do you ever actually look at the driver and go,
"Never got an Uber.
That's my driver." You never got an Uber. Brilliant service, best service in the world. I absolutely love it. It's cheaper, it's quick, it's reliable. Bit strange when you get into the back of a car and they ask you, like, do you want the radio on and off and all that. Hope that I make it to my destination without being murdered or killed.
Make sure to lock the doors still
exactly, yeah. But I suppose what fascinates this more of me about Uber is that, and this goes back to, again, when we're looking at brands and growing brands, we have to not look at just their valuation, is it good for consumer, but rather is it good for society in general in a lot of different cases. So if you look at Uber last year, they lost $8.5 billion. Now, any company that loses $8.5 billion, you would traditionally say is not doing very, very well. Yet their market capitalization is $75 billion, but they operate within the gig economy. So the market has basically decided that a company that is losing this amount of money every year, that offers no protections for its employees because they're not employees, they're contractors. They have no safety, which obviously impacted them greatly over COVID because they had no health insurance. It was hard for them to get COVID payment and so on and so forth. And lack of job security, and the market has decided that no, this is the way that employment should go into the future in terms of gig work and less employment rights. You mentioned them already about
Deliveroo and Just Eat and all these kind of crowds, and more so probably Deliveroo and the Uber Eats as well, all in the gig economy, all working off their own back pretty much.
Yeah, like, I mean, like Uber and Deliveroo and all these companies, they're they're built on something which is called algorithmic management, whereby you are able to predict the demand, correlate that with supply, and then correlate that back with your cost. Because unless you actually sell something, you don't pay someone to do the job, which isn't how it works in a kind of a salary-based contract or salary-based hiring policies. So if you look at Uber, or if you look at Deliveroo in Ireland, for example, rider will get about $4.30 to $4.75 per delivery, basically. And again, if you take the amount of time that it'll take to pick something up, deliver it to someone, you're probably living below the living wage. So for students and things like that, it might be a fine to pick up an extra few bob, and it's flexible work and all that kind of stuff. But when you take something like Uber, which is an industry, particularly here in Ireland and with black cabs over in the UK, and you're taking that industry and you're basically saying, no, this is only a casual working industry now, that is something that can be quite dangerous, especially when we're placing such a huge amount of market cap into these organisations that ultimately could be quite damaging to society. Like if you just as an example, and again, I know they're totally different industries, totally different sectors, but if you take Walmart, for example, Walmart are worth roughly about 350-400 billion, thereabouts. But they employ 2.2 million employees. Proper employees, pay their tax, certain benefits, and so on and so forth. Walmart aren't angels by any stretch of the imagination, but they do employ the people who are working for them. Uber have 40,000 people working for them globally, despite the fact that the majority of their workers are actually contractors. So again, it's something that as a society and as a market, governing bodies need to look at this stuff more clinically and more clearly. Do we want organisations that use algorithmic management, or that use kind of gaps in the legal framework because we haven't kind of created laws to deal with this technology yet? And are we going to allow them to operate in environments that may be more detrimental going
I think
forward?
it's also important to mention there, obviously come from my background within terms of retail and food, it's also important to mention that Deliveroo, it's not small money they're taking from the restaurants. You know, in terms of, it's actually a big enough percentage.
Yeah, because you've worked with a number of kind of hospitality based businesses.
In general, like it's common knowledge, like, you know, Deliveroo would take 30% of every bill basically. So it's a big chunk out of it. Which
is huge. Like, I mean, I know the margins on food will be quite relatively high anyway, but 30% is a lot. Like, I mean, if you even think of basic kind of e-commerce sales or anything like that, like, I mean, if you turn around to someone and said, oh yeah, for every jacket that you sell, you're going to be spending 30% of that on marketing, that's quite a high, it's a high cost to pay more so than anything else. Yeah, it
definitely is. I suppose, any more to say on that story before we finish up?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I think it's worthwhile noting again that when we're looking at markets and when we're looking at marketing, again, it's not just about the advertising. And on one hand, we can look at the developments that are happening in the industry and how there's a lot of value being created. But we also have to be wary for us as marketers that where we create value for a brand, it can be detrimental to an economy. Airbnb is another example. In Ireland and the UK, there's a huge crisis at the moment in terms of rental accommodation, in terms of there not being affordable accommodation for pretty much early career professionals to buy. One of the main reasons for that is that Airbnb is taking a huge amount of property off the market. So that increases demand, reduces supply, and it pushes the price up. So again, it's just important that we do have these conversations as marketers, that we don't just look and say, oh, Airbnb, aren't they incredibly innovative? Oh, look at Uber, aren't they incredibly innovative? From a kind of a capitalistic perspective, these are incredible stories, but we need to always critique these brands and these businesses, what they're doing now, and the impact that they're actually having. I think that's just fundamentally important for us to do as marketers.
And I think the other thing to mention as well is, you've mentioned quite a good bit there about research and where you've got it from, and we're talking about British brands and all this kind of stuff, and Kantar. I think it's very important to mention that there is a lot more research and facts and statistics that will probably come out around British brands and global brands than there would that much work going to maybe Irish brands and Irish research. Would you?
Oh yeah, a huge amount. Like, I mean,
just to say that as well.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of my colleagues would have published in HRMJ, which is particularly my colleague James Duggan inside
shout out to James.
Shout out to James inside Cork University Business School. Are doing a huge amount in this. Are doing a huge amount in this field at the moment. So again, it's important that, I mean, it's fine that being published in an academic journal, but it's important that this information is disseminated a bit wider as well.
Perfect. The last story, I suppose, is something that caught my eye. It came out about a week ago, but it's following on from actually from June. Uncle Ben's rice. They've decided that they are renaming and rebranding all their packaging, all their marketing to just Ben's Original. Mars Food, obviously, look, global food company, have a serious amount of brands under their portfolio, such as Pedigree, Whiskas, Orbit, Extra Chewing Gum, loads of these, and obviously all the usuals like Mars and all the other chocolate brands. But Ben's, Uncle, I'm getting used to it already. Uncle Ben's has been operating now for over 70 years, since 1946. A really iconic brand and logo. We all know it. It's a grinning black man with white hair and a bow tie, just slightly behind the logo of the big name of Uncle Ben's. They feel that they've been getting such long-standing criticism over that possibly the company are employing racist stereotypes of African Americans, that they're deciding to drop this whole name. What would your thoughts be on that?
So, I'm very, very slow to comment on something like this that I don't know a lot about, and why I don't know a lot about it is that when you are talking about racism, when you're talking about prejudice, when you're talking about forcing a specific ideology or thought on people, this is entirely based on your own socio-economic, historical, political context that you live in. So in the context of this specific brand, I don't know the history behind Uncle Ben's. So they're like, for me growing up, I would have cooked with it in college, for example.
You cooked?
No, to be fair, now my mother was probably listening to this, going, that little bollocks never cooked a thing in his life when he was at home. Yeah. But it was on the shelves in supermarket, and I would have saw and glanced at it, but it would never have dawned on me that there was anything overtly racist about it.
Well, apparently this guy never. This is not actually based on one particular guy. It's apparently the image was based on a person that worked on a farm, and the name is from, I could be getting this totally arseways now, and the name was based on a maitre d' or a waiter in a restaurant or something. So
I presume, and again without knowing the background to this, I presume there is some, based on what you've said there about someone working on a farm, if it was from a particular time, then you're probably talking about symbology or iconography of servitude. Which again, if it was a black person in the imagery, that would be seen as quite a racist symbol and racist imagery. So again, like if that is the case, then it's great that Uncle Ben's have taken this step now. They should have probably done it a long time ago if this was indeed the case. So again, I don't know enough about this brand to critique it, and I think it's an important lesson here, is that it's quite difficult nowadays, because there is so much political correctness in the world. Yeah. It's quite difficult to distill.
Very easy.
But it's quite difficult to differentiate between what is a real core fundamental issue and something that should change versus what is someone just being a bit stupid about. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So like again, if this is racist symbology based on the history of the company and where that logo originated from, absolutely it should have been dealt with. But I hope it's not a case whereby they've removed the logo because they're afraid they might get in trouble because someone might misinterpret something, or they mightn't think it's politically correct.
Well, as I said, this has been long-standing criticism that they've had to deal with, and
well, again, if it's long-standing, that's probably correct then, and it's the right decision.
I think so. Mars came out and said that we're not just changing our name and the image on the package, but we're also going to take action to enhance inclusion and equity. So apparently now, by the way, this is all following on mainly from the Black Lives Matter protest, but they've also now decided that they're going to establish a partnership with the National Urban League, support black chefs, and will invest in schools where the provision of fresh foods in Greenville, Mississippi, where Uncle Ben's has been produced, and basically make it more accessible. So they're planning on doing a lot of work locally around where Uncle Ben's is based, or Ben's I should say now is based, and probably not common, I suppose, for a lot of big brands like this, that look, they're going to release a bit of a story, they need a good PR to back it up, I suppose.
So you know what I'm going to say now.
Please
is like how much are they investing in this project?
So what I could find was they're going to do 2 million into a scholarship fund, and they are going to education opportunities for more than 7,500 students and improved access to fresh foods.
Grand. So like, there's nothing wrong with any of that, But if they're saying that they have made quite a lot of money out of promoting a brand with racist symbology embedded in it, and then all they're contributing is €2 million, then that's not enough either. Do you know what I mean?
I think the Mars
Do you know
family,
how much the Mars family? $90 million.
Yeah,
which I
big,
checked.
big money.
Sorry, not 90 million, $90 billion.
They're in the top of the top. I think they're either one in the top or they're in the top 3 of the richest families in America.
And again,
Or in the world, probably,
it's fine to say that okay, they're contributing like 2 million,
Yeah,
2 million after making all of this money off of this very, very bad. So and again, I'm presuming that against long-standing criticism, there is a reason and it is the right decision for the right reasons. But again, if that's the case, in $2 million dollars doesn't do much. And again, great that they're doing this, but do more, do better. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree. And look, they're not the only companies that are going down this route. So Quaker Oats are dropping its Aunt Jemima syrup. Their same again kind of characters' origins is not lining up with kind of day-to-day political correctness nowadays, I suppose. And then,
but again, I would make the point here that these brands doing this after Black Lives Matters, you can understand why they are doing it, because every brand is doing it. Let them actually turn around and say, well, we're going to make sure that there's a specific number of black business people on our board of directors. That would be something that would actually be something they could actually do, which actually has a real impact. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they're really committed to, call it equality, call it inclusion, call it diversity, whatever label you want to put on it, if these brands are committed to that, then actually put things into real action and not just changing your logo, getting a nice PR story out of it. You're just doing it for PR. Actually do stuff that is real, rather than stuff that is just there for the public relations side of it.
Perfect. I think it'd be good to hear people's thoughts on that story. I suppose we might pick it up a little bit maybe next week if we feel like it. So I suppose continuing on to the next section, education.
Yeah. So I work in a university. That's my main job, along with the million things that I'm doing. You do a lot of work in the local universities, colleges, around the city. Yeah. So I think the main thing to say here, that, I mean, we talk about this word disruption, which I hate, because it's again just everything is disruptive and everything is innovative and all the rest of it. But I mean, university education with COVID has been disruptive. Is a diluted phrase what has happened here essentially. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's happened over the last couple of months?
Like, we're definitely into a new era of education. I suppose the whole push of everything going online. I personally don't feel the college experience is going to be anyway like it used to be, and I think it's going to be very, very hard for any student going into first year now. It's not going to be an enjoyable experience. Definitely, even thinking back to my own days in college, I would not like to be going into first year this year full time anyway. Definitely not like to go into first year.
I think it's everything. I mean, I feel sorry for like the first years. I feel sorry for like the fourth year. Everyone's college is meant to be a time whereby you build someone's confidence, you increase their open-mindedness, you get them to critically think about certain topics. They get to find out what their talents are, who their group is, who their collective is. Like when you're in secondary school or when you're in high school, you're kind of in a box, right? Because you're just dealing with a few people in your year.
Bit of a sheep.
Bit of a sheep. In university and college, you get that chance to kind of actually go and actually, I don't want to use the word discover who you are because it makes me sound like a prick, but do you know what I mean? It's just kind of, it gives you that opportunity to again realise the talents that you have and actually go explore opportunities and things like that. And again, if you take just the education piece, as in the lecturing piece of college, then that's not really a college or a university, a holistic education. For me anyway, you're losing out on your societies, you're losing out on your sports, just hanging around the campus, your networking, talking with entrepreneurs when they get on their conference, societies, going to college balls, all these kind of things that are again just an important part of. And again, I know a lot of people will say, Erisha, wouldn't you just invest the 10 grand and go exploring for a year and you'd come back? And again, that works for some people, but in the majority of cases, that university education is a real phase of growth. I know it certainly was for me. So again, I think that I hope we move beyond it quickly. I don't think it will. Like, I feel like the universities in Ireland and the UK are struggling big time with this. Like, if we, and this isn't just a and now COVID issue. But I mean, what's happened in this particular situation is that since the last economic recession, Irish universities, UK universities have been criminally underfunded. And there's been bandages put in place to plug the gap, basically. And now with COVID, all the bandages have come off, and there's a gaping wound there that is very, very hard for the universities to deal with. So funding from the government now is about 40% of what it was pre-recession. Universities then dealt with that via kind of two mechanisms, really. One is increasing international students. That's about 385 million gone from Irish universities this year, because you're not going to get that many international or visiting students coming to the campuses. And then there was obviously cutting costs, which again, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with cutting costs and making sure that you're kind of lean and mean and all the rest of it. But when you then have a scenario where you've made all the cuts that you can possibly make, or the majority of cuts, there can always be more cuts be made, and then you take away the big ancillary revenue stream that you've built up over the last number of years, very, very difficult to cope. And then you're getting lectures to deliver things online with, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we don't have full recording studios. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, you're using your webcams, you're using your microphones, you're doing the best
dodgy
that you can possibly. Dodgy internet, all this kind of stuff.
Do you
very,
think
very
that? Do you think actually numbers will drop this year? Numbers will be down.
Well, I mean, look, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the proof is going to be in the next couple of weeks. Like, I mean, the numbers at the moment have held in Irish universities in terms of Irish students. International students falling off a cliff, of course. There's been an increase in Irish students who are probably seeing this as a kind of a way to get accreditation quickly, I suppose, over the course of a year when they may not be working, because a lot of the employment market isn't great at the moment. So the Irish numbers haven't really suffered at all, really, particularly in the business school. I'm not sure about the other sectors, but I think that it'll be interesting to see how many dropouts you get throughout the year. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Fed up with it, not going to do it anymore.
Fed up with it, yeah. I mean, again, it's a bit of a... And again, I think there's a big difference between, towards the end of last year, there was an understanding that it's a global pandemic. No one was obviously prepared for it, and we went online for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and the whole world basically shut down. There was an understanding and a realization there. Now you're coming into a new academic year, and it's difficult for lecturers to grapple with this. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people will listen and kind of go, oh, sure, you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it online. But you're not. There's a huge amount of more work. It's very, very difficult. Like, what I would say, what you're missing, for me anyway, and this is just me, lecturing, when you're in a class environment, you've 3 things missing that you have in the class that you're not getting online. One, lecturing is a performance. Yeah. And you're exhausted by the end of it. You can emphasize certain points, you can reinforce the value of certain things that you're saying. You don't get that in an online environment, for me. The second one is that you can read the room. You can get a sense of, are they getting this? Are they not getting this? Is this kind of in line with, and that's really, really important. Like, I'm a lot older than, well, not that much, I'm a bit older than the students that I'd be teaching, particularly if you're talking about undergrad students. So therefore, you need to be kind of in tune with, are the examples that I'm using, is what I'm talking about relevant to this audience and relevant to them, which is why I spend so much time on TikTok, because I need to understand what these students are actually doing with in terms of their consumer behavior and consumption patterns. So again, you need to be able to sense the room, and are they getting and are they interpreting what you are saying? Does it mean anything to them? And then the third bit then is obviously the engagement, and those 3 things don't really exist in an online environment. So no, it's going to be a tough year, and I'm not looking forward to it.
I think that's the biggest one, because obviously, like, anyone that knows us, we've done a bit of work together in terms of guest lecturing or whatever it is, and we would definitely have a similar style in that way, I suppose, that we're definitely asking a lot more questions to the audience or to students, and hoping for a bit of feedback and trying to get people involved and bringing up discussion and debates. And I think that is probably the biggest element that I'm going to miss when I'm doing lecturing. Is it's very, very hard to do that online, you know, whether it's someone requesting their microphone turned on, or they're putting up their hand, and hopefully the internet is there for them, or the good quality is there for them. So I think that's going to be the biggest hindrance for me for when I'm doing it.
Yeah, like, I mean, what I loved about like in the lectures where I would be like, okay, I've done my job here, is when the students would start debating with each other. Yeah,
definitely.
Whereas when it's online, it's you asking a question and you're probably getting one back. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of the cameras are off and things like that. So no, it's a very very difficult thing. But what I would say is that there is there is a kind of an opportunity here for universities to maybe kind of reinterpret themselves as well in terms of what they're doing. Like a lot of people would be kind of wary of technology, the internet, in terms of how it's going to impact upon the university.
I think it's going to go one or two ways. It's either going to be people are going to, as you said, the dropouts are going to happen, or people are going to absolutely love the online experience of attending college online. So they're going to look at, is there other colleges or courses that they can do online? Is there other avenues? And the whole online experience will develop.
I'm not sure, because I genuinely don't think no matter how good the technology is,
it won't replace the physical.
It won't replace the physical contact. So I think it's used an ancillary to it. And again, from a marketing perspective, this is great for me. And I've always said it. So like a lot of people, and again, the likes of your Elon Musk's, your Gary Vaynerchuk's, all these guys constantly saying, you don't need to go to college if you want to get into business, or if you want to be an entrepreneur. No need to go to college. Nothing comes from that at all. The real hustle and hustle porn and all this nonsense. Like, do you know what I mean?
You've given Gary Vaynerchuk's. What's your opinion on it?
So my opinion on it is that there's a huge amount more that you get from a university education that you can't just learn from an online video. So with my students, for example, I love when, and I say to them, go off and do your Google AdWords certificate. Go off and do your Facebook blueprint. Go off and do your Google Analytics. Get all those certifications. They're practical skills. They're training. They will be useful for you in a job or in a role. A lot of the jobs that are going to exist in 10 years that the students that I'll be teaching are going to excel in probably haven't even been created yet. So therefore our job isn't just to teach people practical skills. In fact, our job isn't to teach people practical skills. It's about teaching them to critically think about specific business situations or business problems, and then come up with creative solutions for those problems. And again, there's the other bit as well, is that I would always say that it's not just about creating or producing, creating, graduating students who have these particular critical thinking skills, but also again are conscientious about the role of marketing in society and in the world. Going back to stuff I said about Uber, Airbnb, all that kind of stuff, they need to be aware that this stuff is going on, and not just looking at it from a capitalistic kind of a mindset. And again, afterwards they go off and they do whatever they need to do, but we've kind of done as much as we can in terms of putting that impetus, or giving people those the toolkits that they need to actually go and succeed. And again, I think that you just going out and doing the hard graft and kind of failing over and over again and going through that hustle porn that a lot of people say you don't need to go to college for, I think it's nonsense, really. And again, a lot of people always bring up, oh well, Mark Zuckerberg didn't go to college, Elon Musk didn't go to college. It's probably safe to assume that you're not as intelligent as Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. That's a good place to start. Like,
don't
in terms
insult
of your
our
career.
listeners, will you?
Don't insult, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think you touched on a good thing there, and that's probably the point I was getting at when I mentioned that there might be a newfound love for maybe online learning. And you mentioned the Facebook University there, Google Career, whatever one you mentioned there. They're all starting to bring out these academies or universities, their own internal ones, and that's probably what I meant, that you can go off and you can get your Google Ads search, or you can go off and get your, I think it's Facebook Blue, am I right in saying that?
Facebook Blue. So I think
Blue,
like there's a lot of certs out there at the moment, and they're all kind of free, so Google Analytics and stuff like that. Google is the more interesting one at the moment, because they've more recently brought out, and they're specifically calling it Google Career Certificates. Okay. And they are saying that they value this 6-month certificate that you get. You can do it in either business analytics, project management, or user experience. Those are the 3 courses that they're offering at the moment through Coursera. I think it's about 600 quid to do the course, and they're basically saying that they value this certificate the same as they would a 4-year degree.
But obviously that like when you say there it's coming through Coursera, it's obviously starting to get even more accredited, I suppose, and start maybe a little bit more.
Well, it's accredited by Google.
That's what I meant, like, so a lot of these are internal accreditation. So like, do they actually mean anything, really?
Well, this is the point. There's a big difference between training and education. Training is learning to do a certain thing in a certain way, because this is the way that Google AdWords is built. Yeah. This is the way the analytics are built, or whatever the case may be. I don't necessarily want to focus on whether my students can use Google AdWords or use Google Analytics or run Facebook advertising. They can. It's not rocket scientists. They've built multi-billion-dollar industries based on people's ability to use these tools. My students are relatively intelligent people. A lot of them are very, very intelligent people. They are going to be able to learn to use these tools, and these tools change so often anyway. What I want to know is, if you go into a business and you have a particular problem, how do you take all of these tools and the concept of branding, targeting, disruption, technology, consumer trends, how do you take all of this information that is out there, how do you gather that information and then make a reasoned, logical decision that is best for that business from a strategic and an executional perspective? That's what I'm interested in, and that's not just learning how to use Google AdWords. That's learning to, if you've got a €500 budget and you're going into local, well, do I invest it in that? How do I invest it? Do I invest it in Facebook advertising? What's the creative like? How do these interact with each other? How is this going to impact upon the brand? What segments am I targeting? What user am I targeting? How can I track this user experience? That's something that, again, you don't get from just learning Google products. It just doesn't exist. And again, don't get me wrong, like I'm obviously very, very biased here. I work in a university and I work directly with students. But if you, just even a basic example, if you had a certificate from Facebook a number of years ago on their advertising platform, then it came out 12 months later that, oh, by the way, all of our metrics are wrong.
Totally changed. All our systems changed. We've updated.
We've updated everything. All the data that we've given you before is actually false.
Can be done overnight.
Exactly. So, like, I mean, do you value that? And again, there's other things you don't get with these certs either. One of the best things that can happen to a student is that they come into my office and they go, I've got a group member. They're fucking paying the bollocks. They usually don't use that kind of language, but you get the sentiment from, again, they're annoyed by it. I'm like, brilliant. There is not a company or an industry that I've worked in the years that I've been working where I haven't thought that someone was an insufferable, lazy, just hated the person, like. And you have to learn how to work with people. That's life, and that's the kind of thing that you get, again, with your university education, that you're not going to get with a tailor-made, out of the box course that you can kind of view online. Now, again, it's going to go more hybrid. As more people start going to university, as we kind of run out of space, as universities run out of space, things are going to have to be more blended. But at the moment, it's all online, and you're losing a huge chunk of the valuable things that go on in a university. And that's something that's going to have to be contended with, I think, in the future. And again, hopefully with a vaccine, they're not going to revert back to the way that they were, but maybe we'll come out of this and we'll take the best bits of the technology and the online and blend that then with the on-campus experience, and then we can get back to where we were and better than where we were before.
I think we'll probably pick this maybe up in another episode down the line, but how important do you feel it is to go and study, I suppose, marketing? Never mind the digital marketing side of things, but actually marketing, if you're going down that road. Like, do you think it's actually as important now to businesses as it always was?
Like, I mean, again, it comes down to it's not just about, and this is a kind of something that annoys me, is that my module inside that I teach inside in the business school is called digital marketing, which is a bit of an insult to a lot of my colleagues, because like they all use technology, digital, like it's all embedded in everything that you do. Like if you're talking about international brand strategy, if you're talking about expanding into the BRIC countries, if you're talking about doing market research, you're going to be talking about things like sentiment analysis and stuff like that. So everything is digital. I think the main thing with marketing that you get is that you understand the consumer behavior. And again, I'm coming from a research background. I think that to me is the most fundamental thing: understanding your market, understanding your competitors, and understanding the consumer behavior within that particular market space, and not in an abstract way, in a really, really critical, I understand the value that I can bring to this consumer. And again, that to me is the core value that you will get out of a marketing degree. And it'll like, I mean, the world that we live in is socially constructed by both people and by then the media beyond that, in terms of the messages that we're all being fed. It's important to understand this stuff as well, do you know what I mean? And it gives you a certain outlook on the world and how the world looks, and again, it makes you a more critical person, and I mean that in a good way. And again, I think it's important that if you are going into an industry and you are kind of have that commercial mindset, but also you're very, very conscious in terms of your social awareness, in terms of what your brand is doing within society, that to me is a very, very potent combination that you can get, which will benefit you in terms of being a marketer in your career.
I think going forward, it's definitely important to say that probably, as you just said there, you would definitely lecture more on the critical thinking side of things, the strategic side of things, and I would very much from a practitioner point of view in terms of how we actually put it into place.
And they both work together. Like, I mean,
well, they have to work together.
They have to work together. That's the point. Like, I mean, like you have to have a scenario whereby there's no point in me lecturing all of my students to be socialist thinkers, and then they go into a job and they don't have that commercial mindset. That means that they can't climb the corporate ladder, and they can't make all these decisions that I would love them to be making in the future with this kind of critical mindset or whatever the case may be. Like, I mean, if we are looking to graduate the thought leaders of the future, they're going to have to start somewhere, and that means in a lot of cases executional excellence in terms of your email marketing, social media management, graphic design, content creation, whatever field.
There's no point in having a degree, masters, whatever you have in, let's say, digital marketing, and you cannot run a Facebook ad campaign.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have these skills, and then as you climb the corporate ladder, you'll be able to again apply more of those strategic critical thinking skills and understanding again consumers, and be able to do some really cool stuff with your career. And like and I am robbing a quote here from Professor Scott Galloway, is a podcast that I enjoy quite a lot, and he's also in academia. But what he often says, and it's a great quote, is that education exists because it gives unremarkable people remarkable opportunities. And that's not in an offensive way. Everyone typically, like 99% of us, are unremarkable. I'm unremarkable. You're amazing, I'm sure, but I'm definitely unremarkable. That's it. Yeah. But again, most of us are. We're average in terms of how we go about things. And education is something that you can put someone, you can push them up a ladder and to do something really, really exciting with their lives, to open up opportunities for them, doors to them. And I think that to me is the key bit that is missing in an online environment, and that everything becomes very, very transactional, and that's something that again is something that's going to have to be corrected into the future. And again, it's not something like, can't do anything about it. Like, the universities are cripplingly underfunded. International students are gone. The students are still paying very, very high fees, which they shouldn't be paying, in my opinion. But again, the university can't do anything about it. They don't have government support. And by the way, this is far above my pay grade, so if any of my senior colleagues are listening to me, I apologise. But I mean,
and if anyone has a job going, send in the resume.
But again, look, that's just the position that the university is in. And again, I hope we find a way. Like, hopefully COVID corrects itself very, very soon. But I think what we are offering now won't be good enough long term. It won't be good enough medium term. So either COVID needs to correct itself, or there needs to be, again, we talk about this idea of living with COVID, and there hasn't been a way yet that we as a university are able to understand how the students in particular can live together.
There's going to be a lot of frustration over the coming weeks.
Huge amount of frustration. And I think, to be fair, and like I saw, I was just on Twitter earlier on, and like the students are getting slated because they're coming in the first years and they're going to house parties and all the rest of it. And yeah, that's bad. Like, I mean, there's no doubt about that. But we also have to understand that this is a generation that didn't get to do a leaving cert. Now, I know a lot of them probably enjoyed that they didn't have to do a leaving cert, but again, there's a sense of achievement that you get from actually doing it. They didn't get to graduate, they didn't get to go to their debs, and now they're into a whole new environment where they can't really make friends with people. Like, I couldn't make a friend with someone over the internet. I just couldn't do it. Like, Tinder date, maybe.
That's totally different.
I can't go on Tinder. I'm not allowed to go on Tinder. But anyway, that's never mind. But anyway, but the point is that very hard to engage in those social interactions. So I feel very, very sorry for the current generation of college students that are there. And again, they're getting a huge amount of criticism at the moment, and again, there's a lot of them that are acting irresponsibly, but so are a lot of adults as well. There was a thing came out last week in the city that we're from, again, it was 25% of the cases originated in restaurants and pubs. So this isn't the student issue. The problem the students have is that it's a volume issue. If you have 20,000 students coming onto a campus, be it digitally, be it once a week, doesn't matter what it is, they're in the vicinity, then even if a handful of them decide, we want to go for a quiet night down the pub, they can't do that because the volume just doesn't allow them to cope with it. So again, look, I mean, that's something that I don't have the solution for. I'm not saying that I do have a solution for it, but again, it's something that is going to evolve over time. Again, hopefully COVID's gone in 6 months, but if it's not, and if we have to live with it, the whole education system in terms of how the social interacts with the academic, interacts with everything, that's going to be a real challenge, and it's going to, again, like I said, require really innovative and creative solutions, both from an academic perspective and from the students as well.
Perfect. Well, look, I think, and as you covered already, the reason why we wanted to speak about this topic this week was of both of our involvements in education, and the fact that, look, this is the week that all the students are getting back into colleges, so no better time to talk about. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves over the coming weeks, how students get on, what kind of feedback is going to come back from all that, and we'll keep an eye on it. Just want to say thanks again to everyone for listening in. As usual, you can follow us on all the social media channels we're up on. You can subscribe, keep up to date, and thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, no, a very, very interesting conversation. Again, it's going to be interesting to see what we talk about next week, I think. Education was an obvious one, and COVID was an obvious one for the first one, so we're going to have to think of something like it.
Yeah, we'll come up with it. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.
Cheers.